Wisdom and Righteousness Across Ancient Texts, A Comparative Journey Through Sacred Literature. Chapter 1, Setting Our Sacred Journey. Welcome, dear listeners, to a profound exploration of wisdom and righteousness as revealed through 4 remarkable ancient texts. Today, we embark on a journey that spans centuries, cultures, and cosmic visions, examining how different traditions have grappled with the eternal questions of what it means to live wisely and righteously in a complex world. The theme of wisdom and righteousness appears throughout human literature, like golden threads woven through an ancient tapestry. These concepts are not merely abstract philosophical ideas, but living principles that shaped entire civilizations and continue to influence our understanding of morality and spiritual truth today. Each text we'll explore offers its own unique lens through which to view these eternal truths, yet remarkably we'll discover profound connections that unite them across time and space. Consider for a moment the audacity of ancient writers who dared to record divine wisdom for future generations. The Book of Enoch presents us with cosmic rebellions and heavenly visions that challenge our understanding of righteousness on a universal scale. The Book of Jubilees meticulously reframes familiar biblical narratives through the lens of sacred time and divine order. The Book of Judith offers us a human drama where wisdom and courage intersect in the most unexpected ways. And the Samaritan Chronicles preserve a perspective on righteousness that survived persecution and cultural upheaval. These texts were not written in isolation, but emerged from communities seeking to understand their place in the divine order. They wrestled with questions that still haunt us today. What knowledge should humanity possess? How do we maintain righteousness when surrounded by corruption? What role does divine wisdom play in human affairs? And perhaps most importantly, how do different communities preserve and transmit sacred wisdom across generations? As we journey through these ancient works, we'll discover that wisdom and righteousness are not static concepts, but dynamic forces that manifest differently depending on the challenges each community faced. So settle in, dear listeners, as we begin our exploration with the apocalyptic visions of the Book of Enoch. Chapter 2, The Book of Enoch, Cosmic Wisdom and Celestial Righteousness. The Book of Enoch presents us with perhaps the most cosmic perspective on wisdom and righteousness found in ancient literature. Here, the very fabric of creation trembles, as 200 celestial beings, the Watchers, make a fateful decision that will forever alter the relationship between heaven and earth. The rebellion of the Watchers represents a fundamental violation of divine righteousness. These angelic beings, stationed to watch over humanity, instead descend to Mount Hermon, binding themselves with terrible oaths to take human wives. But their transgression goes far deeper than mere physical desire. The Watchers bring forbidden knowledge to humanity, the secrets of metallurgy for weapons of war, the mysteries of cosmetics and enchantments, the movements of celestial bodies for divination. This is wisdom perverted, knowledge divorced from righteousness. What makes Enoch's perspective on wisdom so unique is its cosmic scope. Righteousness here is not merely about human behavior, but about maintaining the proper boundaries between realms of existence. The Watcher's teaching of forbidden knowledge leads directly to the corruption of all flesh, culminating in violence so severe that the earth itself cries out for justice. The Nephilim, those giants born of the unholy union between Watchers and human women, become symbols of unchecked power without righteousness. Yet within this darkness, Enoch himself emerges as a beacon of true wisdom. Unlike the Watchers who descended in rebellion, Enoch ascends through righteousness. His visions reveal the throne of God, the coming judgment, and the restoration of cosmic order. Enoch's wisdom comes not from forbidden knowledge seized through rebellion, but from divine revelation granted through righteousness. He becomes the scribe of heaven, recording truths meant to guide humanity through the coming tribulations. The book of Enoch teaches us that wisdom without righteousness becomes corruption, that knowledge itself can be a form of temptation when separated from divine order. The text warns against the allure of secret knowledge that promises power but delivers destruction. True wisdom, according to Enoch, comes through maintaining proper relationships between heaven and earth, between the divine and human, between knowledge and righteousness. Consider how relevant this ancient warning remains. In our age of unlimited information and technological power, Enoch's vision of the Watcher's forbidden knowledge resonates with contemporary concerns about wisdom, divorced from ethical consideration. The text suggests that righteousness must be the foundation upon which all true wisdom is built, lest our knowledge become our downfall. Chapter 3. The Book of Jubilees. Sacred time and ordered righteousness. If Enoch presents wisdom through apocalyptic vision, the Book of Jubilees offers us wisdom through sacred structure and divine timing. This remarkable text reframes the familiar stories of Genesis through the lens of Jubilee cycles, presenting righteousness as alignment with God's cosmic calendar and eternal order. From the very beginning, Jubilees establishes that wisdom and righteousness are woven into the fabric of creation itself. The text describes how God created the world in 6 days, with angelic assistance, establishing not just the physical universe, but the temporal framework within which righteousness unfolds. The sacred calendar becomes more than a method of marking time. It becomes a blueprint for righteous living. Every 7th day, every 7th year, every Jubilee cycle represents an opportunity for restoration and return to divine order. The retelling of Eden in Jubilees adds fascinating dimensions to our understanding of wisdom and righteousness. Adam and Eve's time in paradise is measured precisely. Adam spends 40 days in Eden before Eve is created, and she waits another 80 days before entering. These specific time frames suggest that righteousness requires patience, that wisdom unfolds according to divine timing rather than human urgency. The fall, when it comes, represents not just disobedience, but a disruption of sacred time and order. What's particularly striking about Jubilee's approach is how it links righteousness to ritual observance. After the expulsion from Eden, Adam and Eve established sacrifices, creating a bridge between fallen humanity and divine righteousness through prescribed ritual. This isn't empty ceremony, but wisdom embodied in practice. Each feast, each Sabbath, each Jubilee year becomes an opportunity to align human action with divine will. The story of Cain and Abel in Jubilees further illuminates this connection between wisdom and divine order. Cain's murder of Abel represents the ultimate violation of righteousness, the destruction of sacred blood ties, and the disruption of divine order through violence. Yet even here, Jubilees offers hope through the birth of Seth and eventually Enoch, showing how righteousness can be restored through successive generations who choose wisdom over corruption. Jubilees teaches us that wisdom involves understanding our place within larger cycles of time and meaning. Righteousness isn't just about individual moral choices, but about participating in a cosmic rhythm established at creation. The text suggests that true wisdom comes from recognizing these patterns and aligning our lives accordingly. Every Jubilee represents a return to origins, a chance to restore righteousness through conscious participation in divine order. This perspective on wisdom through sacred time offers profound insights for contemporary seekers. In our era of constant acceleration and disruption, Jubilees reminds us that righteousness often requires stepping back into established rhythms, finding wisdom in ancient patterns rather than constant innovation. Chapter 4. The Book of Judith. Human Wisdom and Courageous Righteousness. From the cosmic visions of Enoch and the sacred structures of Jubilees, we turn now to the intensely human drama of Judith. Here, wisdom and righteousness manifest not through angelic revelation or divine calendar, but through the courage and cunning of a single woman facing an overwhelming threat. The book of Judith presents us with a world in crisis. Nebuchadnezzar's general Holofernes marches across the ancient world with a massive army, demanding submission and destroying all who resist. Cities fall, temples burn, and entire populations flee before his advance. This is unrighteousness embodied in military might, wisdom perverted into strategic destruction. Holofernes represents power without restraint, knowledge without compassion, strength without justice. Yet against this backdrop of terror and submission, the Jewish people prepare to resist. While coastal cities surrender to avoid destruction, the Jews of Judea recognize that some things are worth defending, even against impossible odds. Their righteousness isn't passive acceptance, but active resistance against forces that would destroy their faith and identity. It's within this context that Judith emerges, and her approach to wisdom and righteousness challenges our expectations at every turn. She is a widow, traditionally powerless in ancient society, yet she possesses a wisdom that transcends conventional understanding. Judith's righteousness doesn't manifest as military might or prophetic vision, but as strategic intelligence combined with unwavering faith. What makes Judith's wisdom so compelling is its practical application. She doesn't receive divine visions like Enoch or follow cosmic calendars like those in Jubilees. Instead, she observes, plans, and acts with careful deliberation. Her wisdom involves understanding human nature, recognizing Holofernes' weaknesses, his pride, his desire, and using these insights in service of righteousness. This is wisdom as tactical intelligence, righteousness as strategic action. The book of Judith presents a complex view of righteousness that includes deception in service of a greater good. Judith deliberately misleads Holofernes, using her beauty and charm as weapons against oppression. This raises profound questions about the nature of righteousness. Can deception ever serve truth? Can violence ever preserve peace? The text suggests that wisdom sometimes requires navigating moral complexity rather than adhering to absolute rules. Judith's prayer before her mission reveals another dimension of her wisdom. She doesn't ask for supernatural intervention, but for strength to complete her task. Her righteousness involves taking responsibility for her community's salvation while acknowledging divine sovereignty. This balance between human agency and divine providence represents a mature wisdom that neither passively waits for rescue nor arrogantly assumes self-sufficiency. The aftermath of Judith's victory demonstrates how individual righteousness can inspire communal transformation. Her courage revitalizes her people's faith, her wisdom becomes their strategy, her righteousness their rallying cry. The book of Judith teaches us that wisdom and righteousness aren't abstract concepts, but lived realities that require courage, intelligence, and sometimes uncomfortable choices. Chapter 5, the Samaritan Chronicles, Preserved Wisdom and Persistent Righteousness. Our final text, the Samaritan Chronicles, offers yet another perspective on wisdom and righteousness, one forged through persecution, division, and the struggle to maintain identity against overwhelming odds. These chronicles preserve the Samaritan understanding of righteousness, a tradition that survived despite centuries of marginalization and conflict. The Samaritan perspective on the division of the kingdom provides unique insights into how different communities understand righteousness. While other traditions might view this split as divine punishment for sin, the Samaritan Chronicles present it as a complex interplay of human choice and divine providence. Their account emphasizes continuity rather than rupture, suggesting that true righteousness transcends political divisions. The Assyrian conquest, as recorded in these chronicles, becomes a crucible for understanding wisdom under extreme pressure. The deportation of the northern tribes could have meant the end of Samaritan identity. Yet the chronicles record how a remnant preserved their traditions. This preservation wasn't through military might or political power, but through careful maintenance of religious practice and textual tradition. Wisdom here manifests as cultural memory, righteousness as faithful preservation. What's particularly striking about the Samaritan approach to righteousness is its emphasis on place. Mount Gerizim, not Jerusalem, stands as the center of proper worship in their understanding. This isn't mere geographical preference, but a theological statement about where divine presence dwells and how righteousness should be practiced. The Samaritan Chronicles present wisdom as knowing the proper place for worship, righteousness as maintaining fidelity to that sacred geography despite external pressure to conform. The story of the Samaritan remnant reveals wisdom through adaptation without assimilation. Surrounded by foreign peoples and practices, the Samaritans had to determine which changes were acceptable and which would compromise their essential identity. Their chronicles suggest that true wisdom involves discerning between core principles that must be preserved and peripheral practices that can evolve. Righteousness becomes not rigid adherence to every tradition, but faithful preservation of what matters most. The Samaritan Chronicles also offer a unique perspective on righteousness through their emphasis on the Pentateuch. By focusing on these 5 books as their complete scripture, the Samaritans suggest that wisdom doesn't require endless revelation, but deep understanding of fundamental truths. Their approach values intensive study over extensive collection, depth over breadth, quality over quantity in the pursuit of righteousness. Perhaps most remarkably, the Samaritan tradition demonstrates righteousness through persistence across centuries of marginalization. Their chronicles don't record military victories or political triumphs, but the quieter victory of survival, the wisdom of endurance, the righteousness of remaining faithful when the world moves on. This perspective reminds us that wisdom and righteousness don't always lead to worldly success, but sometimes manifest as principled resistance to cultural pressure. Chapter 6, Synthesis, Weaving Together Ancient Wisdom. Having journeyed through these 4 remarkable texts, we now step back to observe the intricate patterns that emerge when we view them together. Each tradition offers its unique lens, yet surprising harmonies appear when we listen carefully to their collective wisdom. The contrast between Enoch's cosmic perspective and Judith's human-centered approach initially seems stark. Enoch ascends to heaven to receive wisdom about universal judgment and cosmic restoration, while Judith works within entirely human constraints, using intelligence and courage rather than supernatural revelation. Yet both texts share a fundamental conviction that righteousness requires active engagement with evil rather than passive acceptance. Enoch doesn't simply observe the Watcher's corruption, but becomes heaven's scribe, documenting their judgment. Judith doesn't merely lament Holofernes' tyranny, but takes decisive action against it. Similarly, the structured approach of Jubilees might seem at odds with the adaptive strategy of the Samaritan Chronicles. Jubilees presents righteousness through precise calendrical observance and ritual structure, while the Samaritan tradition demonstrates flexibility in preserving core truths despite changing circumstances. Yet both recognize that wisdom involves understanding time, whether cosmic cycles or historical moments, and aligning human action with divine purpose within temporal constraints. The treatment of knowledge across these texts reveals fascinating tensions and complementarities. Enoch warns against the forbidden knowledge brought by the Watchers, showing how wisdom divorced from righteousness becomes corruption. Yet Judith employs deception and strategic intelligence in service of her people's salvation, suggesting that wisdom sometimes requires complex moral navigation. Jubilees presents knowledge embedded in ritual practice and calendar observance, while the Samaritan Chronicles emphasize preserved textual tradition. Each approach acknowledges that wisdom isn't merely information, but understanding rightly applied. The role of community emerges as another connecting thread. While Enoch's visions are individual revelations, they're meant for communal instruction across generations. Judith acts alone but for her community's salvation. Jubilees frames righteousness within communal observance of festivals and Sabbaths. The Samaritan Chronicles explicitly focus on communal survival and identity preservation. These texts collectively suggest that while wisdom might be received individually, righteousness is ultimately measured by its impact on community well-being. The question of authority and legitimacy runs through all four texts in different ways. Enoch claims authority through heavenly visions and angelic instruction. Jubilees grounds its authority in angelic revelation to Moses on Sinai. Judith's authority comes from her faith and courage rather than formal position. The Samaritan Chronicles assert their legitimacy through continuous tradition despite mainstream rejection. Each text grapples with how wisdom and righteousness are validated through supernatural revelation, textual tradition, practical success, or faithful persistence. Perhaps most significantly, all four texts share an understanding that wisdom and righteousness exist in tension with worldly power. The Watcher's rebellion represents celestial power corrupted. Holofernes embodies military might without moral restraint. The kingdoms divide despite divine intention for unity. The Samaritans survive despite political marginalization. These texts collectively suggest that true wisdom often stands in opposition to conventional power, that righteousness frequently requires resistance to dominant forces. Chapter 7. Universal Insights for Contemporary Seekers. As we reflect on these ancient voices, their relevance to our modern world becomes strikingly apparent. We live in an age that would astonish these ancient authors. Instant global communication, artificial intelligence, genetic manipulation, weapons capable of destroying all life. Yet the fundamental questions they explored remain painfully relevant. What knowledge should we pursue? How do we maintain righteousness in complex moral situations? What wisdom can guide us through unprecedented challenges? The Book of Enoch's warning about forbidden knowledge resonates powerfully in our technological age. Like the Watchers teaching metallurgy for weapons, we've unlocked powers that can either elevate or destroy humanity. The text's insistence that wisdom must be grounded in righteousness speaks directly to contemporary debates about ethical constraints on scientific research, artificial intelligence development, and genetic engineering. Enoch reminds us that not all knowledge is beneficial, that some boundaries exist for good reason. Jubilee's emphasis on sacred time and rhythm offers profound insights for our accelerated era. In a world of constant connectivity and perpetual productivity, the wisdom of Sabbath rest and Jubilee restoration seems almost revolutionary. The text suggests that righteousness requires stepping outside the relentless pace of modern life to reconnect with deeper rhythms, whether through meditation, nature, or simple human connection. The Jubilee principle of debt forgiveness and land restoration speaks prophetically to contemporary issues of economic inequality and environmental destruction. Judith's model of strategic wisdom and courageous action inspires those facing seemingly insurmountable challenges. Her story reminds us that wisdom isn't passive contemplation, but often requires decisive action despite overwhelming odds. In an era when individual actions can seem meaningless against systemic problems, Judith demonstrates how one person's courage can catalyze communal transformation. Her integration of faith and strategy offers a model for engaging worldly challenges without losing spiritual grounding. The Samaritan Chronicles' testimony to persistence and identity preservation speaks powerfully to marginalized communities worldwide. Their example of maintaining tradition while adapting to survival needs offers wisdom for indigenous peoples, religious minorities, and others struggling to preserve identity in a globalizing world. Their story suggests that righteousness sometimes means faithful persistence rather than dramatic victory, that wisdom can manifest as patient endurance across generations. These texts collectively challenge our contemporary tendency to separate wisdom from righteousness, intelligence from ethics, knowledge from morality. They suggest that true wisdom always includes moral dimension, that genuine righteousness requires thoughtful understanding. In an age of information overload and moral relativism, these ancient voices call us back to integrated understanding, where truth and goodness, wisdom and righteousness remain inseparably linked. The diversity of approaches across these texts also offers hope for our pluralistic world. They demonstrate that wisdom and righteousness can manifest differently across cultures while maintaining universal core values. Each tradition's unique perspective enriches our understanding rather than diminishing it. This suggests that contemporary dialogue between different wisdom traditions, religious and secular, Eastern and Western, ancient and modern, can produce richer understanding than any single perspective alone. Conclusion: a peaceful reflection on our journey. As our journey through these ancient texts draws to a close, we're left not with simple answers, but with enriched questions and deeper appreciation for the complexity of wisdom and righteousness. We've traveled from cosmic rebellions to human dramas, from sacred calendars to preserved chronicles, discovering that each perspective illuminates aspects of truth that others leave in shadow. These texts remind us that the pursuit of wisdom and righteousness is not a solitary endeavor, but a communal inheritance passed down through generations. The anonymous scribes who preserved these works, the communities who treasured them despite persecution, the translators who made them accessible across languages and centuries, all participated in a great chain of wisdom transmission that now includes us. We become part of this ancient conversation, adding our own questions and insights to voices that have echoed across millennia. Perhaps the greatest wisdom these texts offer is the recognition that righteousness isn't a destination but a journey, not a possession but a practice. Enoch's visions continue unfolding. Judith's courage must be renewed in each generation. Jubilees cycles keep turning, and the Samaritan remnant continues preserving. These aren't stories with neat endings, but ongoing invitations to participate in humanity's eternal quest for wisdom and righteousness. As you return to your daily life from this contemplative journey, may you carry with you some fragment of ancient wisdom that speaks to your contemporary challenges. Perhaps Enoch's warning about knowledge without righteousness will guide your professional choices. Maybe Jubilee's sacred rhythms will inspire you to create space for restoration in your busy life. Judith's courage might strengthen you to face seemingly impossible situations. The Samaritan persistence could encourage you to maintain faith despite marginalization. These ancient texts remind us that wisdom and righteousness aren't abstract concepts, but lived realities that require daily choices, constant renewal, and community support. Thank you for joining this exploration of how different traditions have understood these eternal truths. May your own journey toward wisdom be grounded in righteousness, and may your pursuit of righteousness be illuminated by wisdom. Until we meet again in the realm of ancient wisdom and contemporary application, may you walk gently and thoughtfully through the mysteries that surround us all. The conversation between these ancient voices continues, and now, having listened carefully to their diverse testimonies, we too become part of this eternal dialogue about what it means to live wisely and righteously in our beautiful, broken, mysterious world.